So I'll just show this again in case you forget. Rich Almeida, VP of Product Strategy at FHIR. This is an sort of informal session. We're going to go through a little bit of what I did yesterday and the things that we couldn't finish at the end of the day. So this first, 15 minutes estimate is we're going to do what we did yesterday a little more closely in depth, and I'm going to highlight the things that needs to be done to get CQL over to C# and fill in some gaps. But then what we're going to do is just work together. So you can follow along right now, but if you can't for whatever reason, then I'll go back through it and then I can walk around and help you out, those types of things. So let's get started. Unless there's any questions, technical issues before we get started. Okay. So yesterday, if you remember, we had Visual Studio Code. This is the plugin, the extension. If you don't have it yet, you can go ahead and install it now on the left. First one, clinical quality language for VS Code. And this will help you get that syntax highlighting things. This is done by the CQL framework team, which is like Bryn. You've probably seen a few of those. If you're interested in this class, then you went to one of those earlier. They're in charge of that. And the DQIC, you've probably heard of as well, will be incorporating this type of tooling into that group to make sure that things stay aligned. So for example, I'm using this now for the CQL dotnet SDK. So Bryn's going to want to keep that without breaking what I've kind of instructed here and kind of built a demo around. So that way everything works, whether you switch between platforms. And then just a reminder that you should have the 2.0 branch, not DevDays. I forgot to delete that before we came. So this branch here, if you don't have it already, pull that one down in Visual Studio. This is the source for VS Code if you ever wanted to debug it or something. And then I like to have for editing CQL, which I'm not that great at, by the way. I'm more of an implementer to get it working. But this website here, which is in the links from the presentation, also is super helpful for looking at the grammar to remember what to type. There's examples throughout all of this. And if you don't know what to type, that's okay too, because I have tons of examples for you. So let's just take a little peek, another reminder. So in your measures authoring project, I gave some examples here. There's documentation of current meds. Yeah, let's look at it over here. Documentation of current meds, which is CMS 00068. And then the related libraries like FHIR helpers. I gave a multiple resource example, parameters example. This is the one that we're going to edit today, and starting in a few minutes here. And then these other ones are just helpful for getting documentation of current meds. It's really for you to look at. It all does run, but it's more like, oh yeah, how do I get measurement period, which is going to be our example in a few minutes. And then if you want, you can always switch over to these other projects. And there's plenty of examples. Measure CMS has all of the CQL for the current 2024 CQL measures. And then there's some examples still, if you're familiar with this. These are some prototype HEDIS measures in the measures demo, and that's the original one that Evan did. He left. So you can check those out here. So if you ever need any examples, just open up some of these and look through. This is how you set up value sets. You know, how does the logic look for a where and things like that. All right, so the first example I'm going to go through is, make sure I'm on the right project, is a parameters example. So what parameters example already does is it calculates the CQL that you see here. And it's kind of just, it's not real, like, interesting CQL. It's not a measure, if you would think about what you build. It's actually just, I specifically made edits to it to just make it so that way you can kind of see how the CQL translates to the C#. And it doesn't really relate. It's not something that you would actually measure. It's to show the differences in the way that CQL interacts. So the way this works is you define the current date, which you probably would never put in a measure. This is more like something that might happen in some of the other parts of like the structured data capture things and questionnaires where you might have some CQL that you pass along. But I wanted to try to show this, like these types of things. Then you have a patient, and we're just seeing if they're male. This is a good example where you can play with this just to get the feel for it, make edits to like female, that the record is active. And then from patient filter, that's what this says. Now just show the birth date. So I'm just kind of showing how the defines, everything links up to each other. We're going to delete this in a minute and actually do our own code. And I just keep going with that. So now we have like the next one down is patient age and years. But what's happening here is that you do CQL logic, which references the previous define. So now it's years between patient birth date, the one above, and the current date, which is the define that we used here. So I've just built out a simple example so that way when you actually do say encounter performed and it needs to be this, now take that and let's filter it some more and like let's output different defines, that you have a real example to use. Any questions on that? Okay. Now for parameters example, this is why it's called that. I have this parameter that's not the parameter that you would see everywhere that you've ever looked at, probably CMS measures and things. Everything has always been measure period. So I did one that's not. So here's age and threshold. Something, again, kind of not real. We wouldn't probably pass in the age. You pass in a birth date or something, or a range, or a measurement period. But I wanted to show like a different version of that. And so in this case, the age threshold for this measure or library is an integer defaulted to 30. When you default it to 30, you don't actually have to pass in anything. It will just be 30. So you could change it here for your testing, or you can pass in something. And this tooling, this demo, does do that now. It didn't do it before, and it still doesn't do it in VS Code tooling. So it's good to, when you build measures in the VS Code tooling, just do this anyway until we get some changes here. And I've already talked to Bern and the team, and they are going to work on a place for this, because I've already found a spot where maybe it should be, and I'll show you in a second. So for now, you can just put your parameters for testing right in the measure, and if you don't pass anything in, then it'll just work. So let's take a look at that. So this is small. I know, can you see that? I don't know, I can make that bigger, but. So you have your, if you can follow my mouse cursor, you have your input CQL parameters examples, what I have open. Then below that, you're gonna have this tests folder. Well, not below, but below it right here on the screen. So I've opened that up, and in here I've created patients that are just for this measure. And just a reminder that each patient needs to have its own directory. This lines up with the VS Code tooling. And within each one, you put the patient data. In this case, it's just one JSON file, that's okay. Or, just a reminder, I'll show the one above, you can split things up by kind of whatever you want. So you could have multiple files. So in this case, the condition is in here, you can trust me, I'm not gonna open each one. But the patient's ID is example. So in this case, I'll open this one. So patient one looks like this. Very simple. Probably doesn't validate because there's barely anything in it, but it's good for this measure. I've written the code such that you can just put raw records in here and it will put them into a bundle. The CQL tooling requires a bundle, or you could just put a bundle, but you can't have both. So you got to pick one. So in this case, this is just one patient in each one of these directories. And like in this example, back to documentation of meds, this is a bundle. So lots of flexibility has been built into the demo. And this also all still works for basically copy the idea of whatever the VS Code is doing in the background. I've done all the directory structures the same, and for one running the measure. So I'll show you, I'll just execute the CQL here. It went through our patients. You can see they meet certain criteria, like here's the date, and the patient is the patient. 44, okay, so you get the idea. Now let me just run that also in here. I think I already built this, so I'll just go ahead and run it. So yesterday, we got kind of lost for time, but I knew I'd cover it today. All this stuff flies by on the screen. This is for debugging and for fun, okay? This is probably not stuff you would put in production, but it's useful because you can kind of see, as you go into each patient, you can see the breakdown in these tables: age, threshold, patient, you know, well, whether something is true or false, what their birth date was. So you have like the actual FHIR record in a nice, pretty format. Just a reminder again, if you go up a little bit, you also have it all broken down by each one of the sections. So the patient filter we just looked at a second ago. So here's the whole resource. But this is hard to look at. We didn't get to this yesterday. What's happening also, based on the settings, is that this file is being built. So anytime you run the VS Code tooling, it creates this little text file right here. And this is very quick and easy to see. We've done the same. We have a new file. It's going to be over here just the same, parameters example. And I've taken a succinct snapshot, more of just the JSON, and I've made it look like what you're going to get in the VS Code tooling. So this is good if, I don't know that a code compare would work, but if you look in one and the first patient is 44 and the CQL .NET says 43, then we have a bug, right? Or you have a bug, something, or the CQL is not being interpreted correctly, so this is good here. So I'll just zoom out so you can see. So it looks very much like, I know it's small, but on purpose, very much like what you get here. You can also tell your project to output to NDJSON. So I added that as an example. I can go show the code in a minute. So T is text, and you can look at these settings after if you need to. And then I forget which, but it's NDJSON. So I'll have to look it up. I forget what I called it. Let's see. Command line options. Sorry, the scrolling is the worst, I know. Find what here. Oh, it is NDJSON, okay. So you can just change this. And then check this directory again, you'll have a JSON file. It's going to be the NDJSON representation of all of the values. It's hard to like convert this right here, but I'll just explain it back in the text file. So it's exactly this, just that each one of these basically rows is going to be a value. So you'll have the source location, age as a threshold will be a top level value, and then all of the criteria. So it's basically what you see here, but in one line for each patient. So that's a way that if you were to build maybe unit tests for a lot of patients and you want to see if your CQL changed, you could do a quick like a code compare with beyond compare or some application. Okay, are there any questions about the test patients or the results thus far? All right. So the last thing is input parameters. Now this is that variable that we were talking about a minute ago. I'll show you the example. And Visual Studio Code does not use this. I'm sorry, the plugin for Visual Studio Code. But we're talking with Bryn and we're going to see what we should do about it. So if you were to want to override what you've defaulted in here, what you can do is add to the directories this input parameters file. It's going to look for this exact file name for now. This maybe will change over time. Or if you put it with the patient, then it's specific to that patient's record. If you make one for like the whole measure, so it's just in this folder, then it will apply to all patients. If you copy and paste it and you want to change it for each patient, then just go ahead and do that and then make the values different. And in this case, I've just defaulted it to 30, but say we make it 40. When you run it, it's going to consume it, and I can show you that code in a second. We'll probably get different values for whether or not they're older than the threshold. So in this case, older than the threshold is true for the first three. Still true for the first three. Oh no, I went to Jason this time. I forgot that I changed that. Yeah, so we lost one. The first two are true, and then this person, your 30. So anyways, it works. That's the point. I'm just trying to show you that it does do what I asked it to do. So you can change the parameters, which is super helpful because even though the VS Code tooling won't do it yet, again, we're working on that. Probably have some change. You know, Bryn just presented out there if you saw it, and they were making changes to this application. So that's all in his roadmap, one of the things that I submitted. So it might change where it is, but for now, this is what I'm going to recommend to Bryn. So just put it, like I said last time again, in the patient directory or just outside of it. And if it's outside of it, it will apply to each. If you mix both, it will take whatever's closest to the patient. So the one in the folder with the, for patient 5, for example. All right, so does anybody have any technical issues that's trying to follow along? Otherwise, I'm going to go into an example that hopefully you can follow along with me. Okay, let's do that. So in this case, we have parameters example. I think it's easy to get started with. We're going to just make substantial changes to this, but it's going to be enough that the patient records will still work. So this seems to be like CQL that you probably would never use, where you pass in an age threshold or something like that. So what we're going to do is just kind of remove some things from this measure and kind of start to rebuild it like it's real, like maybe it's a measure, in fact. And the way that I would think we would do that is first, we're not going to want that. We're going to want like reporting period. So what I'm going to do is just go over to current medications and grab this code here. So that way we don't have to know any CQL. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this, put it in parameters example, right with the parameters. And I'm going to save this and then start doing this back over here. It looks so much better in VS Code if you're building. Usually I have 2 monitors where I can look at what I'm doing. Let's see. We have our measurement period. We'll leave the context patient, and I'm going to start to get rid of some of this. I don't need current day. I'll leave some of the filter, and we'll just get rid of the rest of the stuff. So we can leave males. You feel free to change whatever you want, get rid of marital status, anything else. But what the key is that I'm going to show right now is that we're going to check that their age is something in the measurement period date range. So I know just enough CQL to get in trouble. I'm just going to personally, I'm going to remove some more of this stuff. But you feel free to do what you want. And if you just want to copy what I have, that's fine too. So age in years. That is a function that's built in. And sometimes you get good results here from the, try again. No, it was offering daytime, that's fine, but we want date from, let me see, I'll do the start of measurement. There we go, we're getting somewhere. Period. And so that says that the age in years is a date from the start of the measurement period, and then you have to make a decision. There's lots of ways to do this by it. You can skin this cat 1,000 ways. You could say equals something. I'm going to do a little more complex one in interval, and we're getting our auto. It's awesome. We'll say between 30, 65. And I don't have any red lines, so this is probably going to compile. You could also do like a line that looks like this, age in years, parentheses, between, and then another calculation of age in years. And we can maybe try some of that if there's time after this, if there's no questions, but I want you to be able to get this to work. So I'll leave this up here for a minute. I'll check back in with you. This is where we cut the camera. Play some music. All right, don't feel rushed, but does everybody that wants to do this, is everybody done? If not, just give me a wave like, no, I'm not ready. No more keystrokes. We'll do it this way. Don't look at the screen ever again. If you're done. I'm in parameters example.cql, and it will be, yeah. And I don't remember what the measure said before, but this might actually calculate just the same. I don't want to take it off the screen, though, yet. All right, I'm going to move on here. So I'll save this, and I'll right-click, execute CQL. And it at least compiled, and we got something from Visual Studio Code's extension. And in this case, the patient filter matches. So these three patients must be between 30 and 65. So we'll go over here, and I won't forget that I changed this input parameter. Oh, it shouldn't matter, actually. Leave it. Let's see. Close out some windows first before we get started. All right, so I come back over here. I've made a bunch of CQL changes to my measures. Now, the first thing I need to do is build this. The CQL has changed. That means that the whole process has to run. And I was going to show that yesterday, but we didn't have time. I'm going to show it again today. So what's happening is that the Java tooling is going through and recompiling all the CQL into Elm. Then when we get to the bottom, the .NET application, CQL packager exe, takes that Elm, converts it to C#. The C# is now different. That's in this directory here. You can see parameters example in GitHub is red check mark, which means edited. And you could open this and look through to see what's changed. And you can see now we have like our measurement period that we added. And the logic for the filter has changed quite a bit. And for the fun, let's go ahead and now run it. And we got a bunch of stuff, but like I said, let's go take a look at the results file. Now we'll back this up a little bit so I can read it. And our patient filter is not null for the first 3 patients. And was that correct? I don't remember.
I think I did. Can you set that in code for a second?
Where should I be?
The parameters example.
This guy.
Yeah, because I'm getting some error. So,
I could take a look as well. That's what Let's Build's about. Let's see.
Got rid of a couple extra things, though I don't think they should have caused a problem.
Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, you're getting no data file. Let's scroll up. We're missing some files for some reason, like the test files. Do you have a test folder?
Cloned repo.
Does anybody else have that issue where there's no results? I'm curious to see. Imagine I forgot to check in the test. Oh no, we get some. Does anybody have results that wants to have results? Because that would be good. Reaffirm that something works besides on my PC. Okay, cool. Awesome. All that work, I mean, those weeks. Let me show a few more things, and then we can just kind of ad hoc. You can make changes. I'll walk around and help. But I just don't want you to be lost in the SDK later when you want to actually maybe do this just by yourself. So I'm going to spend a little time in the folder structure again. So let's see, I'm in Measures Authoring, and I just wanted to show that if you go down to Resources, we didn't spend much time in that. If I were to take these resources and load them into a FHIR server, now if you load them happy, it's going to ignore the DLL, so you got to load them into FHIR server for now. Or you can still load them, but it's going to use the Elm, so it's not part of the C# process, to any knowledge that I have of any FHIR server. But you can still take these files. These are libraries. Okay, they're FHIR libraries. They will work. Don't quote me, but we've tested them in other places, so it's just a regular FHIR library. And I'll just show the example again where now we have, parameters like measurement period. You come down, you have the content. Here's the Elm. Some of the engines run right off the Elm. Some will run right off of CQL. In ours, we run off the DLL. And then here's the raw C#, which I don't know, maybe it gets compiled and we use the DLL, but we keep the C# around. So I'll close this for now. And I just want to show you just so we have like an end-to-end. I wanted to make sure that we show that it actually gets to a server, that things do work. Let's see. I'm going to kick off FHIR server. And for this, I've already loaded these for this example. But I just wanted to tie this up a little bit with a FHIR actual query. Of course, this isn't ready yet. My Docker's not running. Classic. I turned it off, yeah, because the computer was acting up. Okay, this is Postman. There was no requirement to have this. This is why I just wanted to show it. But just so you know how this all gets done in the end, in case you haven't done this before, is that there's a couple ways to execute CQL, many ways actually, but two of the main ways is the $CQL operation, which will execute the CQL directly. Like engines like Happy can do that right now. We can't because we don't have CQL to Elm done yet. But once we do, then we'll convert on the fly and you'll be able to do that. And the other is the library evaluate. So you would post your library to your FHIR server and save it into the system, just like you would any other resource, like value sets, post it. And then what you do is you call it using parameters or the ID. So you could like, I don't think I can zoom this in, no. But right here, you would say library, the name of the library, $evaluate, or you could pass it in as the parameters. So in this case, you can call it canonical, with the version if necessary. And I hope I didn't break this since I kicked this off, but basically these are the parameters that will just work for this measure that we did yesterday. So I'll run it. And look at that, I got results. So what you should get with library evaluate is a parameters resource. That's the way FHIR is going to represent all of that crazy JSON that we just looked at, and even those text files actually gets translated into a parameters resource back. So I'll just kind of show you what that looks like. So in this case, this is based on the CQF IG. So sometimes you have to say like what the type is. So this is the code, tobacco smoking status is the code, and in here we'll find our patient from yesterday and all of the generated patient code. This is the entire patient record that's in the example. So each thing, like if you were to, I'm trying to find the one that's at the bottom. So smoking status observation, let's just go look back at that briefly. Here it is. So this is the result from this exact define, which also lines up to that text file. And now this is how it's going to look when you get a return in FHIR. So it's going to say this, the name of it, and then the result is the thing after it. So it's the name, smoking status, that's the define. Everything's always name. And then you'll have whatever it is. So in this case, it's a resource, but you may get something that says like string, decimal, bool. It'll say like value bool, like real FHIR stuff, right? So and then so in this case you have all of that, the resource as an entirety. Any questions on doing that? I just want to make sure that you've seen it end to end. Okay. So it'll look different. What you can do, which I don't have code, is you could try to do this also in the SDK. Add that to your demo and have the parameters resource come back. So maybe you could skip putting it in a FHIR server for now. This is so I have a development version of FHIR server running because we don't have this all loaded, and this is what it takes to get almost measure report working. We just have this like example, so it's built for this. No, because this is FHIR server. It does. You will pass parameters, or you'll pass the ID up here. So this will look the same if you do this in most servers. This might not. The subject is there. I'd have to go look at the IG for library evaluate. I might have it. But yeah, you just create a parameters resource and you can pass it with a post. As long as you just look at the IG and you line up, I think subject is one, definitely the canonical, and then the others are not. There's lots of things in library evaluate. And we don't support this yet in FHIR server, so that's why it's just a little prototype. Okay, well, I can put the example back up. Otherwise, I do have the option to walk through some of the code if you want just like a tour of the CLI. So does anybody need help getting something running? We can do that quick. You still need help?
I'm having errors and I don't know why, but like you can keep going.
Okay, it's up to you.
No, I feel if everyone else is good, I can chat later.
Okay, yeah, I'm around. Yeah, if nobody needed any help, what I thought I would do is continue on by like just taking a tour of the CLI code, because I like when somebody codes something for me to give me like, this is how this works. And so maybe some notes will help you for when you get home. So let's go look at the CLI. Everything starts, I'm gonna make this as small as I can that you can read. That's still readable? Because it's really hard to see on my screen. Should I go one more up? Please speak out. All right. So let's see, we'll get rid of this for So it's a classic, if you've ever coded in C#, it's a classic main program with command line parameters. I would say, if you're not familiar, that's okay, ignore this. This is like stuff that you can just find anywhere on the web. But the key is that it runs through, it says run command. And this is the command that we run locally in this class. And what we're doing here is we're creating a new library runner. That's where all the magic happens. There's a little section here for we're going to run a different method inside the library runner. So in this case, depending on the assembly source, we run with resources or we run with the measures project. And just if you don't remember what that is, run with resources is to take the libraries that we just built that I just showed you that you load to a FHIR server and open those and run the DLLs in there. And so it takes all the DLLs and it puts the assembly context together to run it. And that's the way that if you were to write your own application that has nothing to do with like a FHIR server, but you're still going to process FHIR data, you would probably do that because you're going to dynamically load these resources. Or you could also run with the measures project, which is to use the actual library that's been built. So if you're familiar with C# coding, you can open the bin folder. And because I've created the dependency backwards, the CLI is in here. And whatever you call this project, in this case measures authoring, you'll have a measures authoring DLL. And that will be where all the C# is. And you're probably going to need a few different dependencies in here, particularly the ones that all say HL7 CQL. This is difficult right now because it's all in the SDK like in itself. But once I get you over to the NuGet packages, it'll be much more clear as to what you need, because we'll give you the exact NuGet packages to put in there. So for now, if you wanted to run this application, you could take this out or publish it to release first, move it somewhere else. Oh, that's quick.
There you go.
Yep. And then run this. And so you can change the command line parameters. So you could think of this almost as a production tool. You could take this whole thing out. It doesn't have to live in the SDK. Compile it, run it with your options, point the value set folder somewhere else. Again, and that's just passing command line parameters. Take the test directory, structure it for real data maybe. I'm not specifically encouraging using this for production. I would put a lot of error handling in here. You probably need to fix it for performance, but it's a really great start. And so we have about 5 minutes left. So let's just start looking in the CLI. So I said all the magic happens in library runner. I'll just take you right to the end, unless there's questions. So in here we have what I said, run with the measures project or run with resources. And it's just different startup code. Everything then goes through run shared. Zoom this in a little bit. So the difference is really, do we run the loaded assembly or do we run with using this resource helper, load resources? And it gives in the directory that we pass in. So I get it. I think it beats the horse on that one. So then run shared is where lots of fun stuff happens. So let's just walk through that real quick, and that will probably take us to the end. So both, whether you run each one, we need to resolve the library. That's just to make sure that we've gotten the right assembly. And then this next part is to basically stage the value sets. So we load them up from the local directory, whatever directory you pass in. So it doesn't have to be the directory that's here in the settings. So you could have one big directory somewhere else and just always use those. Then we have validate value sets. I won't jump into this code, but what this is doing is taking the value sets that you've loaded from disk and making sure that they match the value sets for the library that you're running right now, and all dependent libraries. So that's a nice piece of code that I wrote that I always needed. So definitely jump into that code and take a look there. Because if you don't load the value sets for the libraries, you'll just have no result. So you need to check that. And then the rest of this is to process the test patients. A lot of the time is spent, not time, but a lot of the logic here is spent just looping through the directories that we've built. So that way it's working the same way as VS Code extension. So, but if you just jump sort of down, I'm going to show you the important part again. It's this, this part here, process bundle. So this is, if you don't need to loop and you just want to run one patient, this is the important code here. It's this whole thing where you create a context for the bundle, you pass in your input parameters, you pass in your value sets. This is the logic to actually run a particular piece of CQL, a C# file with CQL in it, and it loops through each method. So if you want to change things, this is where you'll grab this code most importantly. There are, in the resource helper and in the library extensions, there are things like loading the bundle, just sample code. So this is just helper information from using the other SDK, the regular open source SDK. We have the load value sets that we just talked about, load resources. See here, we're parsing the libraries. This create bundle is when I said that you can put just patient files. It will create a bundle for you and load it. This is for loading the import parameters. Now I'm just reading method names to you, but because I only have 1 minute. And then library extensions. There's good stuff in here because there's like get dependencies of the current library. That's used to like get the value sets. So if you have a need to interrogate a library and ask it other things besides what the value sets are for it, what are the data requirements? What are the, I don't know, types of, what are the value sets? I'm not value sets, what's the other thing we put in there? That? Code systems, yeah. Because you can build your own code system if you look at some of these. You don't have to use a value set. You can just say, it's got to be in this code list. That's all our time. I can take questions like after the presentation. Thank you.